The autumn air felt crisp as Andre Wilson hurried across the sprawling Westlake University campus. The tall maple trees were just beginning to turn, their edges kissed with gold and crimson. His breath came out in small puffs as he checked his watch again. 3 minutes late already, and the math building was still 2 courtyards away. Andre had transferred to Westlake just 2 weeks ago, midway through the fall semester. The university's renowned mathematics program had been his dream since he was 14, solving equations that most adults couldn't understand. But getting here hadn't been easy. He'd spent 2 years at a community college first, working nights at his uncle's repair shop to save enough money for tuition. What made his journey even more remarkable was what most people didn't know. At 17, Andre had published a paper on advanced calculus applications that mathematicians twice his age were still citing. At 18, he'd won the Northeast Regional Math Competition without breaking a sweat. But Andre kept these achievements to himself. He wanted to be judged on his current work, not his past wins. The ornate double doors of the Hartman building came into view and Andre picked up his pace. His previous class had run over, and now he was going to make a terrible first impression in advanced calculus bar. Not ideal for any student, but especially not for one of the few black students in the predominantly white mathematics department. When Andre finally slipped into the lecture hall, the class had already begun. 60 pairs of eyes turned to watch him enter. At the front of the room, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses paused mid-sentence, letting silence fill the space as Andre found an empty seat in the 3rd row. As I was saying before we were interrupted, the professor continued, his voice carrying a hint of irritation, this course will challenge you in ways you haven't experienced before. Some of you might discover that you're not as prepared as you thought. Andre pulled out his notebook, trying to make himself smaller in his seat. He recognized Dr. Hayes from the department website, a tenured professor with 30 years of teaching experience and old-school methods to match. Advanced calculus requires discipline, Dr. Hayes continued, pacing in front of the whiteboard. It requires commitment. It requires students who value punctuality and preparation. His eyes landed on Andre for a beat too long, making the connection unmistakable. The student next to Andre, a young woman with curly hair pulled into a messy bun, gave him a sympathetic glance. Around the room, a few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For the next hour, Dr. Hayes covered the course syllabus and expectations, occasionally dropping comments about standards and rigor while glancing in Andre's direction. Most professors would have moved on from a student's tardiness within seconds, but Dr. Hayes seemed determined to make an example of the newcomer. When the lecture finally ended, Andre gathered his things quickly, hoping to introduce himself properly and explain his situation. But 3 other students had already swarmed the professor with questions, and Dr. Hayes pointedly turned his back when he saw Andre approaching. "Don't take it personally," said a voice beside him. It was the curly-haired student from next to him. "I'm Leah. Dr. Hayes is like that with everyone at first." "I'm Andre," he replied, shouldering his backpack. "Does he always single out students who come in late?" Leah hesitated. "Not exactly. Not all students." Her expression told Andre everything he needed to know. "Great," Andre sighed. 2 weeks in and I've already got a professor who's decided I don't belong here. The math department can be traditional," Leah said carefully. "But once they see what you can do, it won't matter." "You any good with derivatives?" Andre smiled for the first time that day. "You could say that." They walked together toward the building exit, Leah explaining that she was a junior who had survived 2 previous courses with Dr. Hayes. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the air, and students lounged on the grassy quad, soaking up what might be the last pleasant day before winter settled in. "There's a study group that meets at the library on Thursdays," Leah mentioned. "You should join us. It helps to have allies in Hayes's class." Andre nodded, grateful for the invitation, but unsure if he wanted to draw more attention to himself. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his mother asking how his first day of classes had gone. He thought about what to tell her. She had been so proud when he got accepted to Westlake, bragging to everyone at church about her son, the mathematician. He couldn't bear to worry her with this. Back at his small off-campus apartment, Andre spread his course materials across his desk. The syllabus from Dr. Hayes's class outlined weekly problem sets that most students would find challenging. but Andre could see they were straightforward applications of the fundamentals. He'd mastered this material years ago, working through advanced textbooks by flashlight after his mother thought he'd gone to sleep. Andre opened his laptop and pulled up the first assignment. He could finish it in an hour, but something made him hesitate. Maybe he should intentionally make a few small errors. Nothing major, just enough to avoid standing out. The thought made his stomach twist with a familiar feeling, the same one he'd had in high school when he'd dumbed down his work, after a teacher accused him of cheating. No, he said aloud to his empty apartment, not doing that again. He worked through the problems with precision and care, showing every step of his thinking. If Dr. Hayes wanted to see his work, he'd see exactly what Andre was capable of. No more, no less. The next morning, Andre arrived at the lecture hall 20 minutes early. He chose a seat near the front, arranged his notebook and pencils neatly, and waited. Other students trickled in, filling the room with chatter and the rustle of backpacks being opened. Dr. Hayes entered exactly on time, his gaze sweeping the room and pausing briefly when he spotted Andre already seated and prepared. A slight frown crossed his face before he turned to write on the board. "Today we begin with a review of concepts you should already understand," he announced. "Let's see who actually did the reading." His first question was directed at a student in the back row who answered correctly. The second went to someone in the middle. For his third question, noticeably more difficult than the others, Dr. Hayes turned to Andre. "Mr. Wilson, isn't it? Perhaps you can tell us the application of L'Hopital's rule when evaluating the limit of a quotient where both numerator and denominator approach infinity." The question was clearly meant to stump him, pitched at a level beyond what the assigned reading had covered. Around him, Andre could feel students holding their breath, expecting him to fail. Andre met Dr. Hayes's gaze steadily. "L'Hopital's rule states that for functions f and g, if the limit of f(x) gives us an indeterminate form like infinity over infinity, we can instead find the limit of forkid, where f and g are the derivatives." He paused, then added, "But we need to be careful about confirming that the original limit is truly indeterminate, and that the functions meet all the necessary conditions for the rule to apply." Something flickered across Dr. Hayes's face. Surprise, perhaps, or disappointment that his trap hadn't worked. "Correct," he said curtly, before turning to another student with an easier follow-up question. For the rest of the class, Andre took detailed notes, raised his hand for questions that showed engagement without showing off, and tried to be the model student. Yet each time he spoke, Dr. Hayes found some minor point to critique or correct, even when Andre's answers aligned perfectly with the textbook. After class, as students filtered out, Andre felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Leah again, with two other students beside her. "That was impressive," said one of them, a tall guy with glasses. "I'm Devin, this is Zoe. We're in that study group I mentioned." "Dr. Hayes definitely has it out for you," Zoe said, keeping her voice low. "But that answer you gave? Chef's kiss." The look on his face was priceless. Andre shrugged. "I just answered the question. Join us for coffee?" Leah asked. "We can fill you in on Hayes' testing style. His problem sets are straightforward, but his exams are where he tries to trip everyone up." For a moment, Andre considered declining. Part of him wanted to keep his head down to avoid drawing any more attention. But another part, the part that had worked too hard to get here, knew he might need friends to survive Dr. Hayes' class. "Sure," he said finally. "Coffee sounds good." As they walked out together, Andre glanced back once at the lecture hall. Through the door, he could see Dr. Hayes gathering his papers, his brow furrowed in thought. Whatever the professor's problem was, Andre would have to navigate it carefully. He had worked too long and come too far to let anyone's assumptions hold him back. Not now, not ever again. The campus coffee shop buzzed with afternoon energy as Andre settled into a corner table with his new acquaintances. The rich aroma of freshly ground beans filled the air, mixing with the sound of students typing furiously on laptops and the hiss of the espresso machine. "So," Devin said, stirring his iced coffee, "what's your story? Transfer student, right?" Andre nodded. 2 years at Riverdale Community College before this. Always wanted to come to Westlake but needed to save up first. "Well, you picked a hell of a professor to start with," Zoe said, brushing her short black hair behind her ear. "Hayes is notorious in the math department." Leah jumped in. "He's brilliant, don't get me wrong. Published in all the top journals. But he's stuck in another century when it comes to teaching, and other things. The implication hung in the air. Andre sipped his coffee, weighing whether to address it directly. "You mean he has issues with students who look like me?" he said finally. The three exchanged glances. "We didn't want to be the ones to say it," Devin admitted. "But yeah, there's a pattern. Last year there was this brilliant girl from Detroit, Nicole," Zoe interrupted. "She transferred out after one semester. Hayes kept saying her community college background wasn't rigorous enough for his standards." Andre's stomach tightened. He'd faced this before. Professors who saw his skin before they saw his mind, who assumed his presence was due to quotas rather than qualification. "The math department here is like a fortress," Leah explained. "Old guard protecting old ways. Hayes is just the most obvious about it." "Great," Andre said, trying to keep his voice light. "So I've got a professor who decided I don't belong before I even opened my mouth." "Pretty much," Zoe confirmed. "But we've got your back. Our study group meets Thursdays at 7 in the library basement. It's the only way some of us survive Hayes' class." As they talked, Andre learned more about his new allies. Devin was a double major in math and computer science, hoping to work in AI research. Zoe was on a pre-engineering track, taking advanced math as preparation. And Leah, like Andre, was a pure mathematics major, fascinated by abstract problems and theoretical applications. "We should head out," Leah said, checking her watch. "I've got statistical analysis in 20 minutes. Andre, you coming to study group Thursday?" "I'll be there," he promised. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Andre would arrive early to Dr. Hayes' class, prepared and alert. The professor would deliberately call on him with the most challenging questions, often interrupting his answers mid-explanation. When Andre wrote solutions on the board, Hayes would find minor issues to criticize: his notation style, the order of his steps, even his handwriting. But what frustrated Andre most was Hayes' reaction when he took creative approaches to problems. During their unit on integration techniques, Andre solved a particularly difficult problem using an elegant substitution method he'd learned from an old Russian textbook. His solution was valid, more efficient even, than the standard approach, but Hayes marked it wrong. The requested technique was integration by parts, Hayes said coldly when Andre approached him after class. "If you can't follow basic instructions, perhaps this level of mathematics isn't appropriate for you." "But my solution is correct," Andre insisted, pointing to his work. "The answer matches exactly, and it takes fewer steps." "Mr. Wilson," Hayes said, pushing up his glasses, "mathematics isn't just about getting the right answer. It's about discipline, about following established methods. Your creative approach suggests a lack of proper foundation." The implication was clear. Hayes didn't believe Andre had actually learned calculus properly, that he had somehow skated by on shortcuts without understanding the fundamentals. Andre walked away from that interaction with his paper still marked incorrect, and a burning sensation in his chest. In his apartment that night, he stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. "Don't let him get to you," he told himself. "You know what you can do." And Andre did know. Outside of Hayes' class, he was thriving. His differential equations professor had already asked him to consider undergraduate research opportunities. His linear algebra instructor frequently used his solutions as examples for the class, but in advanced calculus he remained the student whose every move was scrutinized for failure. Thursday evening found Andre in the basement of the university library, surrounded by open textbooks and half-empty coffee cups. The study group had grown to include a few more students from Hayes' class, all drawn by the reputation of this particular group for helping people survive the course. "Look at this problem set," groaned a new member named Tyler. "It's like Hayes is trying to make us quit math forever." "Let me see," Andre said, reaching for the paper. He scanned the problems quickly. The trick on number 4 is to recognize it's actually a disguised version of the mean value theorem. For the next hour, the group worked through the most challenging problems together. Andre found himself naturally taking a leadership role, guiding the others through difficult concepts with patience and clarity. It felt good to help, to see the light of understanding dawn on someone's face when a concept finally clicked. "You should be teaching this class, not taking it," Leah said as they packed up for the night. "You explain things way better than Hayes." "My mom says the same thing," Andre admitted. "She thinks I should be a teacher someday." "You'd be good at it," Devin agreed. "Unlike some professors, you don't make people feel stupid for asking questions." As they walked out of the library into the cool evening air, Zoe checked her phone and suddenly stopped walking. Guys, did you see Hayes's email? He just sent it 10 minutes ago. The others pulled out their phones. Andre opened his email to find a message from Dr. Hayes to the entire class. For Monday's session, prepare to discuss the attached paper on multivariable optimization. Be advised that I will select one student to solve the problem presented on page 7 at the board. This problem illustrates the practical limitations of certain optimization approaches and will likely be unsolvable within our class time constraints, but the attempt should prove instructive. He's setting someone up to fail in front of everyone, Leah said, looking up from her phone. That's low, even for him. $10 says he picks Andre, Devin muttered. Andre had already opened the attached paper and scrolled to page 7. The problem involved optimizing a complex function with multiple constraints. Challenging, certainly, but not impossible. In fact, it reminded him of a problem set he'd worked on for a mathematics competition 2 years ago. I should prepare for this, he said quietly, just in case. The weekend passed in a blur of focus. Andre spent hours at his desk, working through not just the assigned problem but every conceivable variation of it. He found 3 distinct approaches that would work, each with different strengths. One was particularly elegant, a solution that revealed the underlying beauty of the mathematics involved. By Sunday night, Andre could solve the problem in his sleep. But as he closed his notebooks and prepared for bed, doubt crept in. Was he setting himself up for more humiliation? If Hayes called on him and he solved it perfectly, would the professor simply find some minor flaw to criticize? Or worse, accuse him of somehow cheating? Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle. Andre dressed carefully, choosing a blue button-down shirt his mother had given him for his birthday. For the days when you need to look like the professional you are, she had said. In the lecture hall, tension hung in the air. Students whispered among themselves, speculating about who would be called to the board. Andre took his usual seat near the front, arranging his notebooks with methodical precision. When Dr. Hayes entered, the room fell silent. He placed his briefcase on the desk and surveyed the class with a tight smile. I trust you've all reviewed the assigned paper, he began. Today we'll see a practical demonstration of the limitations of standard optimization techniques when applied to complex, real-world problems. He turned to the whiteboard and wrote out the problem from page 7, adding a few extra constraints that weren't in the original paper. Andre recognized the additions immediately. They were designed to make the standard approach fail. Now, Hayes said, turning back to face the class, who would like to attempt this problem? No hands went up. Andre kept his firmly on his desk even as he felt Hayes's eyes settle on him. No volunteers? Hayes smiled thinly. Then I'll have to select someone. He made a show of looking around the room before his gaze returned to Andre. Mr. Wilson, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate your unique approach to mathematics. The challenge had been issued. Andre could feel every eye in the room on him as he slowly stood up. Across the room he caught Leah's encouraging nod and Zoe's subtle thumbs up. As he walked to the front of the class, chalk in hand, Andre knew this was more than just a math problem. It was a crossroads. Whatever happened next would define his place at Westlake, and perhaps even the trajectory of his academic future. He took a deep breath, faced the board, and raised the chalk to its smooth surface. Behind him, he could almost feel Dr. Hayes's expectation of failure, but Andre Wilson had never been one to meet other people's low expectations. The chalk felt cool against Andre's fingers as he faced the blank whiteboard. Behind him, 60 students held their breath. The only sound in the lecture hall was the soft ticking of the wall clock and Dr. Hayes's pen tapping impatiently against his desk. Andre studied the problem written on the far side of the board. It was exactly as he remembered from the paper, but with those extra constraints Dr. Hayes had added, the ones designed to make standard approaches fail. A small smile tugged at the corner of Andre's mouth. The professor had unwittingly modified the problem in a way that made Andre's third solution method even more elegant. Mr. Wilson, we don't have all day, Dr. Hayes said, his voice carrying a note of anticipated satisfaction. If the task is beyond your capabilities, you may return to your seat. Andre didn't respond. Instead, he began writing, his chalk moving with quiet confidence across the board. First, he laid out the initial function and constraints, organizing them more clearly than Hayes had. Then he began his approach. Rather than following the textbook method, the one that would inevitably hit a wall with these particular constraints, Andre took a different path. He applied a transformation he'd learned from an obscure paper published by a mathematician from Ghana, converting the problem into a different form that revealed hidden patterns in the constraints. The class watched in silence as line after line of mathematical notation filled the board. Andre was aware of the confusion on many faces. He was using techniques beyond what most had been taught. But he was also aware of Dr. Hayes's expression shifting from smug expectation to puzzlement, then to growing concern. 20 minutes into what was supposed to be an impossible task, Andre stepped back to review his work. He'd covered nearly the entire board, but the solution was taking shape beautifully. He could feel the momentum now, the familiar rush when a complex problem began yielding to persistence and insight. "This approach won't work," Dr. Hayes interrupted, standing up from his desk. "You've overlooked the third constraint entirely." Andre paused, chalk hovering over the board. Without turning around, he replied, "No, I haven't, Dr. Hayes. I've transformed it along with the others. If you look at equation 14, you'll see it represented in the new coordinate system." A murmur rippled through the class. No one spoke to Hayes this way, certainly not while challenging his understanding of calculus. "Impossible," Hayes said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. He approached the board, scanning Andre's work with narrowed eyes. Andre used the moment to gather his thoughts for the final steps. He could see the path clearly now. 3 more transformations, then a substitution that would reveal the optimal solution. "Continue, then," Hayes said stiffly, returning to his desk. "Though I maintain that your approach is fundamentally flawed." Andre took a deep breath and turned back to the board. For the next 15 minutes he worked steadily, explaining each step as he went. He was no longer just solving a problem. He was teaching the class, showing them how to see beyond the obvious approach. "And finally," he said, writing the last line, "we get our answer. The optimal value is exactly 17.38, occurring at these 3 points." He circled his result and stepped back. The room was absolutely silent. Then from the back row someone began to clap. Others joined in tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Andre caught Leah's eye. She was beaming at him, giving him a subtle thumbs up. Dr. Hayes remained seated, his face unreadable as he stared at the board covered with Andre's work. For a long moment, no one knew what would happen next. Would he find some trivial error? Dismiss the entire approach as invalid? Finally, Hayes stood and walked to the board. He examined the solution carefully, tracing the steps with his finger. The class watched, tension building with each passing second. "The method is unorthodox," Hayes said at last, "but the result appears correct." The words seemed to cost him physical effort. Andre released the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank you, sir. Return to your seat, Mr. Wilson. We'll continue with today's lesson." As Andre walked back to his desk, students gave him subtle nods of approval and quiet smiles. He had done more than solve a difficult problem. He had stood his ground against a professor known for breaking students' confidence. The remainder of the class passed in a blur. Hayes lectured mechanically, avoiding eye contact with Andre. When the bell rang, students gathered their things quickly, buzzing with excited chatter about what they had witnessed. "That was incredible," Devin said, catching up with Andre in the hallway. "I've never seen Hayes speechless before." "Where did you learn that transformation method?" Zoe asked. "That wasn't in any of our textbooks. I read a lot," Andre said simply. He wasn't ready to reveal the full extent of his background, how he'd been corresponding with mathematicians around the world since he was 16, or how he'd published his first paper under a pseudonym because he feared not being taken seriously at his age. "Well, you certainly showed Hayes," Leah said, "but be careful. He's not the type to take humiliation well." Andre nodded, the adrenaline of the moment beginning to fade. "I didn't do it to humiliate him. I just solved the problem he assigned." "Yeah, but you solved it like a boss," Tyler chimed in, joining their group. Words already spreading across campus. "New guy destroys Hayes with math skills. You're going to be a legend." That wasn't what Andre wanted. He hadn't come to Westlake to become known as the student who embarrassed a professor. He'd come to learn, to build his future in mathematics. This kind of attention could make things more difficult, not less. I need to get to my next class, he said, uncomfortable with the growing admiration. I'll see you all at study group. As he walked across the quad alone, Andre's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. How's my favorite mathematician doing today? He smiled, wondering what she would say if he told her about the last hour. She'd always taught him to stand up for himself, but with dignity, never arrogance. He texted back, all good, Mom, learning a lot. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. Some stories were better told in person when he went home for Thanksgiving break. The campus felt different somehow as Andre made his way to the science building for his next class. Students he'd never met nodded to him or gave small waves of recognition. News traveled fast in university circles, especially news involving a professor as notorious as Hayes. After his afternoon classes, Andre headed to the mathematics department office to check his mailbox. As he rounded the corner into the main office area, he nearly collided with Dr. Hayes, who was coming out of the department chair's office. For a moment, they stood face to face, neither speaking. Hayes's expression was unreadable, his mouth a tight line beneath his graying mustache. Mr. Wilson, he said finally, his voice low. A word. Andre followed him to a small seating area away from the administrative assistant's desks. His heart pounded, but he kept his face neutral. Your performance today was unexpected, Hayes began, not quite meeting Andre's eyes. I've been teaching that particular problem for 7 years. No student has successfully solved it during class, let alone using the approach you demonstrated. Andre waited, unsure where this was going. I spoke with Dr. Chen just now. Hayes continued. She seems to think you show unusual promise. She suggested I consider you for the department's undergraduate research program. This was the last thing Andre had expected. The research program was typically reserved for juniors and seniors with exceptional records. Thank you, sir, he said carefully. I'd be very interested in research opportunities. Hayes nodded stiffly. Yes, well, we'll see. Your unorthodox methods may not translate well to serious research. But Dr. Chen was insistent that I consider it. Andre realized what had happened. The department chair must have heard about the classroom demonstration and intervened. Hayes wasn't offering this opportunity willingly. He was being pressured to do so. I appreciate the consideration, Andre said, maintaining his composure. I'll continue to work hard in your class. See that you do. Hayes stood abruptly. And, Mr. Wilson? I expect all future assignments to follow the methods taught in this course. Creativity is one thing, but there are standards to maintain. With that, he walked away, back straight and shoulders rigid. Andre sat alone for a moment, processing what had just happened. It wasn't an apology, far from it. But it was an acknowledgement, however reluctant, that Hayes had underestimated him. For now, that would have to be enough. As he left the mathematics building, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the campus. Andre felt something shift inside him. A quiet confidence that had nothing to do with proving others wrong and everything to do with knowing his own worth. His phone buzzed again with another text, this time from Leah. Study group tonight? We're all dying to learn that method you used. Andre smiled and texted back, I'll be there, and I'll bring donuts. He had come to Westlake to learn mathematics, but perhaps he had something to teach as well. And that, he realized, was a possibility he hadn't considered before today. The next morning, Andre arrived at the mathematics building to find a note taped to his department mailbox. Please see me in my office. 2 p.m. today. Dr. Chen, department chair. His stomach tightened. Being summoned by the department chair could mean anything. Throughout his morning classes, Andre found it hard to concentrate. Had Dr. Hayes complained about him? Was he in some kind of trouble for challenging a professor? By lunchtime, his appetite had disappeared completely. At precisely 2 p.m., Andre knocked on the door of Dr. Chen's office, his heart pounding against his ribs. Come in, called a warm voice. Dr. Chen was a petite woman with short salt and pepper hair and rectangular glasses that gave her an owlish appearance. Her office walls were covered with framed mathematics journal covers and photos of her with students at various conferences. Andre Wilson, she said, smiling as she gestured to a chair. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Please sit down. Andre sat, trying to read her expression. You wanted to see me, Dr. Chen? Yes. Word travels quickly in our department. especially when someone solves Kowalski's optimization problem with a transformation approach that even most faculty members wouldn't recognize. Her eyes twinkled. That was quite a demonstration yesterday. I just solved the problem the best way I knew how, Andre said cautiously. Indeed. And that's precisely why I wanted to talk to you. She leaned forward. Andre, I took the liberty of looking into your background after Dr. Hayes mentioned yesterday's class. You're not just any transfer student, are you? Andre shifted uncomfortably. I'm not sure what you mean. A.J. Wilson, she said, raising an eyebrow. Author of novel applications of topological data analysis and economic modeling. Published in the Journal of Applied Mathematics 2 years ago. That's you, isn't it? Heat crept up Andre's neck. He had published that paper under his initials, never expecting anyone here to make the connection. Yes, he admitted. But how did you... I recognized the transformation technique you used yesterday. It's similar to what you described in your paper. She smiled. Which I found quite brilliant, by the way. I cited it in my own work last year. Andre sat back, stunned. You read my paper? Of course. Though I had no idea the author was an undergraduate. Most assumed A.J. Wilson was a graduate student or young professor somewhere. She tilted her head. Why hide your accomplishments, Andre? Your application to Westlake mentioned nothing about your publications. Andre looked down at his hands. I wanted to be judged on my current work, not past achievements. And honestly, he hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. I was concerned that if people knew my age and saw my photo, they might not take my work seriously. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. I understand. More than you might think. She gestured to a framed article on her wall, a piece from the 1980s about the surprising success of Asian women in mathematics. We all face different barriers in this field. For the next hour, they talked about Andre's research interests, his unconventional path through mathematics, and his future goals. It was the most engaging academic conversation Andre had experienced since arriving at Westlake. I have a proposal for you, Dr. Chen said finally. We have a special session at next month's regional conference on emerging techniques in applied mathematics. One of our presenters had to withdraw due to medical issues. I'd like you to present your work in that slot. Andre's eyes widened. Present at the conference? But that's for professors and graduate students. And for exceptional undergraduates with significant contributions to the field, Dr. Chen countered. It's time for A.J. Wilson to step into the light, don't you think? The offer was both thrilling and terrifying. What about Dr. Hayes? Andre asked. He doesn't exactly seem supportive of my unorthodox approaches. Dr. Chen's expression softened. Richard Hayes is a complicated man, brilliant in his own right, but set in his ways. He and I have had a frank discussion about you. She adjusted her glasses. Let's just say he now understands that cultivating talent is part of his job, regardless of his personal feelings. Andre left Dr. Chen's office with his head spinning. A chance to present at a mathematics conference, to be taken seriously as a researcher rather than just a student, was beyond anything he had expected from his first semester at Westlake. That evening's study group session had a celebratory air. Word of Andre's meeting with Dr. Chen had already spread. Conference presenter, Zoe exclaimed, offering Andre a high five as he entered the library basement. That's huge. How did Hayes take it? Devin asked, looking up from his laptop. I haven't seen him, Andre admitted. Not since yesterday. Well, you'll see him tomorrow, Leah reminded him. Don't expect a warm reception. She was right. The following day in advanced calculus, Dr. Hayes was coldly professional. He acknowledged Andre with a curt nod when calling on him, but made no reference to either the problem-solving demonstration or the upcoming conference. Yet something had changed. Hayes no longer seemed intent on humiliating Andre. Instead, he simply treated him like any other student, neither singling him out nor ignoring him. For Andre, this neutral treatment was victory enough. He could focus on learning without constantly bracing for attack. As the weeks passed, Andre divided his time between classes, study group sessions, which had grown to include students from other mathematics courses, and preparing his conference presentation. Dr. Chen had become something of a mentor, meeting with him weekly to review his work and offer guidance. 3 days before the conference, Andre was working late in the mathematics department's undergraduate lounge. The building was nearly empty, most students having gone home for the evening. He was so absorbed in refining his presentation slides that he didn't notice Dr. Hayes enter the room until the professor cleared his throat. "Mr. Wilson, still here at this hour?" Andre looked up, startled. "Dr. Hayes, yes, I'm preparing for the conference." Hayes nodded, his expression unreadable. For a moment he seemed about to leave, but then he hesitated. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to Andre's notes. Surprised, Andre nodded. Hayes picked up the presentation outline and began reading, his brow furrowed in concentration. Minutes passed in silence as he flipped through page after page. "Your approach to the Huang-Matsuda conjecture is interesting," Hayes said finally. "But your proof in section 3 has a gap." Andre leaned forward. "A gap? Where?" Hayes pulled a chair over and sat down, something Andre had never seen him do with a student before. "Here," he said, pointing to a specific line. "You're assuming continuity at this boundary, but that needs to be proven separately." Andre studied the equation, immediately seeing the issue. "You're right. I completely missed that." For the next hour, something extraordinary happened. Dr. Hayes, the same professor who had tried to humiliate Andre in front of the class, went through the presentation point by point, identifying weaknesses and suggesting improvements. His criticism was sharp but constructive, focused entirely on the mathematics rather than on Andre himself. "Why are you helping me?" Andre finally asked when they had worked through the entire presentation. Hayes sat back, removing his glasses to clean them with a handkerchief. For the first time he looked tired, human. "Dr. Chen shared your paper with me," he said after a long pause. "The one you published 2 years ago. It's exceptional work." "Thank you," Andre said, unsure where this was going. "I had a similar paper rejected 3 times before it was published," Hayes continued, his voice quieter now. "It took me 7 years of revisions and resubmissions. I was 34 when it finally appeared in print." He put his glasses back on. "You were what, 19, 20? 17, Andre admitted. Hayes nodded slowly. 17, he repeated. "Mathematics comes more naturally to some than others. I had to fight for every insight, every result. Nothing came easily." In that moment, Andre glimpsed something he hadn't considered before, that Hayes's harshness might stem not just from prejudice but from a deep insecurity about his own abilities. A fear of being outshone by students who grasped intuitively what had taken him years to master. "Your mathematical intuition is remarkable, Mr. Wilson," Hayes continued. "But intuition alone isn't enough for serious mathematics. Rigor, precision, attention to detail, these are equally important. That's what I've been trying to teach, perhaps ineffectively." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was an acknowledgement, an extension of professional respect that had been absent before. "I appreciate the feedback, Dr. Hayes," Andre said sincerely, "and the time you've taken with my work tonight." Hayes stood, gathering his things. "Your presentation will reflect on this department, Mr. Wilson. I expect it to be excellent." With that, he walked to the door, then paused. "And Andre, the transformation technique you used in class that day? I've incorporated it into my lecture notes for next semester. With proper attribution, of course." After Hayes left, Andre sat alone in the quiet room, processing what had just happened. The professor hadn't become warm or friendly, but something fundamental had shifted. Hayes had seen him, truly seen him, not as a black student to be doubted, but as a mathematician to be challenged and developed. The next morning, Andre called his mother. "How's my favorite mathematician?" she asked, her voice bringing an immediate sense of home. "Actually, Mom," Andre said, smiling to himself, "I think I'm finally becoming one."